people are kind of wishy-washy. They don't know what they believe. They want to say this or that. But if you have streamlined steadiness of what's going on, and you're about what you're about, and they've heard you say it and they've seen you actually do it, that's what I want my kids to see. Is I can't tell them to read the Bible and they never see me ever do it. I can tell them to memorize stuff. I don't want it to be legalistic. Like, I don't want it to be this realm. It's like, this is an actual relationship with Jesus that I want you guys to actually have yourselves. But I have to be the model for you first if I'm the leader of the home.
Welcome to the Built to Last podcast, a community for coaches founded on the principles encourage, equip, and empower. We are performance coaches working for eternal purpose. Now, here are your co-hosts, Charlie Ray and Justin Bentavania.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Built to Last. We are honored to have you with us. We're excited about this episode. Guys, real quick, if these episodes have blessed you, if you've enjoyed them, if you've taken a lot out of them, we would be honored and blessed if you would like the show, subscribe, leave a comment. Doing those things, it really helps a lot to just get the show out to more people. And so if the ministry has blessed you guys, we would just be so honored if you guys would, like I said, give it a rating or review. That would mean the world to us. And so today on our show, guys, we were able to talk to Chris McCormick. Coach McCormick is the director of strength and conditioning for Olympic sports at Florida Atlantic University. Coach McCormick talked a lot about some different things, life-based, more than just the weight room side of things. But before we get to that, one announcement for you guys is that we are now going to be syncing up the verse of the month with the articles that Coach Slay is writing on a weekly basis. And so whenever you hear a show, if it's released that week, if you have a question or you want to learn more about the verse of the month, a great place to go to is our website, www.teambuilttolast.com, where you can read an article posted every Wednesday. And that week would be the verse of the month from this show. And so, Charlie, I just want to turn it over to you. You want to read the verse of the month and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. The joy of the Lord is your strength. What does that mean? What exactly is the context of that verse? Can we really be strong in the joy of the Lord? Guys, we encourage you, go dig deeper by reading Coach Andrew Slay's article about that Bible verse. And he goes into the context of it, and he really does a great job explaining just the ins and outs of what that actually means. So really want you guys to be strong with the joy of the Lord. That is your strength. This episode was really impactful. Coach McCormick did an amazing job talking about family, talking about balance, and ultimately talking about a performance pathway, his life plan that he created. We would encourage you guys, if you're not watching this, if you're listening to it, go to the YouTube channel that we have and watch the video, because on the video, we actually do a screen share, and he shows us his performance pathway, which, like I said, is essentially his life plan. Very cool, unique idea, something that he came up with during COVID, and we got a lot out of this. Sit back, enjoy, and hope you get a lot out of this.
Hey guys, welcome back to Built to Last. We're here for another amazing episode with Coach Chris McCormick. And Coach, thanks for being on the episode.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, Coach, we'll just go right into it. Give us a quick background into your faith story, diving into how you became a Christian and kind of where you're at currently with your faith.
Awesome. Well, I've been a Christian about 10 years. I was saved on February 28th, 2009. Thankfully to my now wife and the influence of her parents, their youth pastors, where we're from in Indiana. I was a typical college kid and lived the college life. I was also doing a student assistantship and coaching. Originally started out in football, and she invited me to church one day, hopefully to wow her parents, when I knew that would be a big thing if we were to continue on dating. And God struck me right in the heart. And after hearing one of the sermons, about a week into me mulling on it, trying to figure out what in the world God's conviction actually meant, I talked to my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, the next Saturday. I was like, I do not know what's going on, but I need to talk to somebody about this. So her parents came up, drove up, took me through the Bible, and just preached really the gospel to me and shared it with me, and took me through Romans. And I prayed and repented of my sins and put my faith totally in Jesus Christ, and I got saved that day. So
that is awesome, man. And one of the things, so actually me and Coach, we were talking the other day, but it's not a typical, faith story in the sense that, some people grew up in the faith, but you actually got the Roman road and somebody to legit walk you through it and change your mindset completely. I mean, you went in to try to impress her, and little did you know that she would be the one that would, ultimately her mom and dad would kind of be the ones to witness to you and then end up starting a family. I mean, that's just such an incredible testimony to see God's faithfulness. Well, so becoming a Christian later in life, I mean, do you see there's been any kind of differences in, your responses to like how you see things, maybe your worldview or anything like that? Because like some people grew up with Christians, so it's like, oh, my mom and dad were Christian and this was Christian, so they always had this one worldview perspective. But for you, you've kind of seen both sides a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think my wife and I have come from almost two different extremes. She has her parents, both my parents are deceased, so I was raised by my aunt and uncle. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of the things of just coming into a situation is a lot different. And she was raised in the church. She got saved when she was really young. And again, like her mom and dad are youth pastors, so she was in church all the time, and I wasn't. So for me, kind of entering into it. But I think I may have even told you the other day is I'm very thankful for my faith in the sense of I don't know how other people and other coaches, specifically on profession, especially now this past year, how they hold on to anything other than what God has given us and the
Yeah.
opportunity with the gospel. I mean, it's such a crazy time, and I have felt the most peace during this time, I think, because of my faith. And I think that's a huge thing of talking to other people and other believers. And if not, the sense that they get a joy coming out of you in a chaotic situation, and that opens up the conversation right there to start talking about your faith. And it's like, why, like, how in the world are you right with all this going on and you don't know if you're going to get furloughed or what's going on with your job and
Yeah.
whatever, especially having a family. But I think it's my being an adult, I think not being raised in church, I think for me has given me a unique perspective because I haven't been in the tradition. So me coming in and us moving away, my wife was in one single church for, 11, 12 years. And then we had to move off as our own family and coming together as one. And
Mm-hmm.
we had to figure out what our relationship truly is with Jesus, and especially her. So I think
Yeah.
us not having family around, it's been tremendous because we moved to 5 different states. We've had to find a church. We've had to find community.
Yeah.
We've had to continue to do that. So I think that perspective in itself has been wonderful because we have our own personal faith, and we know that even her parents' faith can't save us. Like even with our
Mm-hmm.
children, being that example, being that model consistently, even though we've moved a bunch, we have to have that within our home if biblically we want to have the home that we talk about and want to have ultimately for our family.
Yeah. It reminds me of the different challenges that we face as like believers, and I know you're at FAU, Florida Atlantic University. It's not a Christian university by any means. And so my question to you in regards to like your faith, what challenges do you feel like you've run into as a leader, specifically leading your staff, trying to do it from a faithful perspective, integrating your faith. I mean, just from a Christian perspective, you've done that with your family. Obviously, you've talked about like the hardships of having to move all over the place. What's it like in the work environment, especially at a non-Christian university?
Yeah, I mean, it's my wife and I have both experienced both secular schools and even when I started out in strength and conditioning at Charleston Southern University, it's a Baptist school. And the last school I was at, Gardner Webb in North Carolina, they're a Baptist school. So I've been in you are FCA mixture, you're leading like a Bible study within the weight room perspective versus I live in South Florida now, which is complete opposite of the country. Like there's a lot of different viewpoints down here too.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing for me has been, even with my staff and hiring and things like that, it's not directly trying to hire a believer and try to find that. I've been very fortunate to find that in people. And I think that's more of a sovereignty thing of people being attracted to each other. But you stand out big time down here. When you work at a Christian university, there easily can even be seen an athlete looking at a coach, and that coach may not be following or might just not express certain beliefs, and they're like, well, I'm kind of like them, and I think I'm a Christian too, where if you're
Yeah.
outspoken about what you believe, I think it's maybe a little more easier in the secular environment, but it has to be consistent. Like the consistency aspect as coaches that we talk about all
Mm-hmm.
the time with values, discipline, all that, like you also have to live that too, and how you act and how, like, you can't be one way and then all of a sudden you're going to flip this switch and be completely the other way, but then use the Bible as kind of like your disciplining tool. It's like, it's
Yeah.
more than that. And I think
Yeah.
that's the first time I came down here, I had people ask me like, why do you have a smile on your face all the time? And I opened up the conversation. And it's like, well, first off, South Florida, it's 90 degrees, sunny all the time. I'm from the north, and that's the first thing. And then it's like, because there's a joy that I have that I want to tell you about. And I think how you go about that and figure out within your context that you want to say that to the people around you. But it's not hard for people to see it, especially in an area down here. Our church told us a couple weeks back, they said Palm Beach County is the most unchurched county within the United States. So you think about that, and it's like, you're going to stand out if you have certain viewpoints, but if you have certain beliefs too, and you do it in a loving way and express that to others around you, just like I told you with the calls over COVID, I'm pretty open about my faith, especially on social media. Like most of my posts are devotions and Bible and different things like that, but how much it directly turns to that, because if someone sees that and they know that about me, it's like, it's almost like a sense of he's somebody I can trust and talk to because he's kind of open about some things. But that's also a conviction too, of just leading into that. So I think there's both sides of that coin that are good, but it's consistency, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yeah. And Coach, shifting towards a little bit more to the family side of things. I mean, are there things you're doing in your family that where you're helping them grow spiritually as well?
Yeah, I think the consistency aspect in that, my wife and I have really tried to press, since we don't have a ton of family around us, and we've not had it in really our 10-year marriage. Of we want our children as young as they are. We have an 8-year-old, we have a 5-year-old, we have a baby on the way. My wife's 7 months pregnant, and we're in foster
Congratulations.
care. Yeah, thank you. So it's a little hectic right now. But even something like foster care, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit, is like, we want our children to visually see it, but it's also the order of things that are biblically covenant wise of marriage and then children and things like that. Like, I want my children to see that. I wasn't raised in the Christian home. So for me, I see other things, or I see my in-laws, or I see certain people and what they believe. But us almost being on our own island, it's like, I want my children to see me reading my physical Bible and not reading on my phone. I want them to see, hey, we're going to do this at night, devotion, we'll pray together. I'll have my son pray. And I mean, he's like having these routines and habits, even if they're not understanding of it yet, but as the norm to them. And even foster children coming into our home, it's like, this is how we've done life. And I don't want it to be this, this weird thing someday my children get up and they're like, hey, can you pray for us? And it's like, they've never prayed in their life verbally. Yeah. It's like, I want them to be able to say, and our daughter who's saved, like, she's 8 years old. I mean, she'll sit there, go out, pray for like people in her class. She'll like openly say stuff. Like, to see that for us is refreshing, because it's like, we don't want there to be a double standard. Even if she came to my job and was like, that's how my dad is, like, he's not like that at home. So I think for us is that consistency aspect of it, but I want it to be real, and life is real and life is hard. And, I don't want them going through that. It's just a patty cake type of idea. Like, you're going to struggle with things, but this is why our faith is so important, because this is truly the only consistent thing in our world. And I want you to be able to fall back to that. But I also, you need to figure that, and God calling you with salvation and things like that. I just want them prepared for that when that time comes, hopefully.
Yeah. And one thing I've been thinking on real quick too, is just in terms of leadership, you touched on before how you like that your children see you reading a hard copy of the Bible, and you being a leader in your home and at your job. I was thinking before, I was talking to some kids on campus about leadership, and we were talking about how some leaders are lead by example type people. And as we were talking, I was like, you know what? I don't think you can be a leader if you don't lead by example. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I'm the leader by example type person, or I'm the one who, speaks to the team. I'm the one who, organizes things like on the road trips. It's like, if you're not a lead by example leader, then I don't know if you're a leader, because how you live your life, that's going to speak the greatest volume to, when you're trying to talk to other people about things. If you're not living it yourself, then who's going to really listen to you, And so, do you have any examples though, Coach, about you leading your family or leading people at work, or just how you've responded as a leader to when things aren't going so well and you had to fall back on kind of your principles and pass it on to your kids?
Yeah. I mean, I think I keep going back to consistency. I think it's just funny with coaching is there's so many things that obviously we can read within the Bible that you can pull out leadership wise and just say, like, these are these principles I live my life by. I think the major difference is obviously through the gospel and salvation and actually the Holy Spirit coming through, like the fruits of the Spirit coming out, you can try your hardest as much as you can to be of these things, unless you don't have that unlimited power to continue to fill yourself back up to go and do that. I think that is the biggest thing. Even with the COVID time, I think one of the biggest examples has been just talking to other coaches like you guys yourselves. And like I said, I'm open about my faith, and the conversations go that direction, then we're going to go that direction. But I think there's something about that leadership aspect of the consistency, if it is with these coaches, how they see you, if it's an athlete. We've all been around coaches that are not consistent in their behavior. And if you're the consistent one, especially being a strength and conditioning coach versus a team sports coach, athletic trainer, admins, whoever it is, they know what they're going to get from you. So it's never like this up and down nature. And we easily talk about it from the, like, how we are in the weight room and how you should be. But that's how you should be as a believer too. And all these cliche things can be thrown out, but ultimately that should permeate, and he should permeate through all facets of your life. And I think when you are consistent in that realm, then people are drawn to that, because you don't always see that in the world. People are kind of wishy-washy. They don't know what they believe. They want to say this or that. But if you have streamlined steadiness of what's going on, and you're about what you're about, and they've heard you say it and they've seen you actually do it, that's what I want my kids to see. Is I can't tell them to read the Bible and they never see me ever do it. I can tell them to memorize stuff. I don't want it to be legalistic. Like, I don't want it to be this realm. It's like, this is an actual relationship with Jesus that I want you guys to actually have yourselves. But I have to be the model for you first if I'm the leader of the home. And that's here and at my job if I'm directing a department like I do. And I think those difficulties in that sense, and taking that responsibility on, it's a huge responsibility. But like you just said, leading by example, it's like, people say they do that or they don't do that, but it's also one of those things too, is like, you need to make sure that you're ready for that responsibility, because it's hard. Like, it's very, very hard when you're doing it. If it's at home, you're balancing all these things. If you're not a parent, if you're not a director already, because it's going to take a lot of, I would easily say getting punched in the face a lot of the times, because there's just a lot of situations that if you are not within yourself prepared, and that's through spiritually, I think majorly, it's going to be very difficult in your journey.
Yeah, so much to comment on right there. One of the things that you said though with consistency is we are a light to the world, right? So it's not only being consistent in the weight room as a coach, but it's being consistent in your faith walk. And I just think that's such a powerful thing for everybody to think about, those who are listening to this, like the consistency that you have as a Christian, no matter if it's COVID or if something great is happening in your life, something bad, great, whatever, like you're consistently joyful in the Lord, you're thankful, you're humble, you're gentle, you're those different attributes of the fruits of the Spirit, and you're doing it by the power of the Spirit. That says something, different about, like, what's different about this guy, what is different about this coach, this person. And I just think that's such an incredible thing that we can do to show God's faithfulness, is be consistent as believers. And then one other thing I wanted to comment on too was you're talking about leading by example, Justin. And it's funny you said that. I was thinking the exact same thing. Like, you really can't lead unless you're doing it by example. And one of the things I'm learning, I'm 8 months into marriage, and you got to lead your wife spiritually, and they're supposed to be the leader of the house spiritually, right? So it's like, okay, we got to schedule these Bible studies, prayer times. I'm thinking all this stuff. And the reality is like, I spend time with God in my prayer closet. I read the Bible, and I try to do so in such a way where I'm faithful and consistent. And guess what happens? If I faithfully pursue those things, she follows. Like, if you're faithfully pursuing those things as a father, as a husband, your children will follow. Like, maybe not in the same exact way, but they will see that. They will see it. And you don't even have to, you can talk about it, but it's more about walking the walk. You know what I'm saying? So
that stuff's contagious.
Yeah,
that stuff is
it
contagious.
is so contagious, and people see it, and it's like consistency is strong. It's like, exactly what you're going to get with this person, regardless of the situation, But I want to jump into something you brought up, ministry. So you've moved all over the place. You've had lots of different jobs. You're obviously, strength conditioning is lots of work hours. Okay, we're there early in the morning, late at night, weekends, travel, all that kind of stuff. How has it been with, trying to balance ministry involvement? Is it even possible to be involved in church, or is it just something, you're just gonna if you work football sector, I guess you're just not going to go to church during the season? Like, how does that work to even try to be involved in a church? I mean, what's your philosophy on that? What would be your advice to people that are feeling stuck and they have no church involvement?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's a difficult one. And I think that's one of the biggest things, especially here, to be honest, is I've struggled with is the extra side of serving and different things like that. Like I've been a
Hmm.
part of small groups. I've been a part of just the additional thing of like the one-on-one individualized type of idea of, we go to, and most of the churches we've been to are fairly bigger churches. And when we found a church in the area, it's been a good church. So for us to mainstay there, however long it's been, 2 or 3 years, and we've moved to another place, I think it's just obviously depending upon your schedule. I work men's and women's basketball. There's days that we work Sunday, and obviously preaching the Sabbath to even my children consistently, it's very difficult to do that. Of finding, okay, like I have to work, and I have my 8-year-old daughter saying, "Why are you doing this?" And it's like, because this is what my jobs require me, and that's not a very good answer. So I think that's also one of those things too, of you have to balance out within your context and figuring out what jobs you want to go pursue. Football is a great example. Like it is very difficult and it's all consuming if you want to be with all in football. And I left the football side and went towards the Olympic side. And it's a little less demanding, but it's also, you have to find and pick those spots. And coaching is one of those conflicting things. I've talked to a lot of pastors. I've talked to a lot of different people actually in ministry, and it's crazy how similar our jobs are to theirs. Just from the standpoint of working with people, the time demand, the moving, we consider things a calling, like we're called to coach, they're called to into ministry. But I think that's even a balance aspect of something that I hope to get a lot better at, because that is one part of my life that I want to enter into even more outside of just my home. But coaching does, honestly, it does get in the way, just because of the chaoticness of our schedules.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Coach, appreciate you sharing that. So then shifting, I feel like a lot of this conversation has been more away from the office and more towards family and spiritual life, and we love that. If we stay there for a second, I know we talked a little bit through our interactions via email and your conversation with Charlie before the show about parenting and foster care. Would you mind just shedding a little light on that for any listeners who are maybe entertaining the thought of foster care and curious what your life is like on that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say a crazy thing that's happened, but I think honestly 2020 has been a tremendous year for us. I think just the time wise, but I think foster care has been, if not one of the best things I've done, and if it's not been for my wife to kind of taking the lead on that. My last school I was at, our men's basketball coach Tim Kraft at Gardner Webb, him and his wife are foster parents, and they actually adopted a child. And one of the assistants there, him and his wife moved on to another school. She actually works within the state for foster care, so we were always around it. And my wife actually was like side by side, like going to court cases, all these different things. So from the outside looking in, I saw it. I was kind of around it at my last school, but I always kind of had this holdout of like, what was if we moved? What was if like I can't give enough time? What was if like I had a bunch of excuses, even though the Bible specifically says take care of widows and orphans. So that's almost a commandment in the sense of, like, in some shape or form, you can impact this, you can help this. And when we moved down here, our church actually is huge into foster care in our county, and they actually host the foster care agency we're licensed to. They host like all these events for them. So we got down here, and I was praying about it one day, and I told my wife, I was like, I literally don't have an excuse. Like, we have no excuse not to do this. We talked to other parents down here, but our kind of path has been crazy because we've had almost over 10 children in the past year and a half, which is not normal. We've had 2 children that have come straight from the hospital. My wife stays home. So they were brand newborns, like premature in our home. We currently have a child right now who's 5 months old, and it may go into adoption. So if you'd have told me a year and a half ago, like this is what would have happened, I would have told you you're crazy. But I think for anyone that's investigating out there, especially as a coach in the business, we talked about ministry, like just how consuming our jobs can be. There's a different feeling when you look at a foster child, in the sense of it's very similar to how God adopts us into his family. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me is like when I see these foster children, there's no other people. Some of them have been reunified, some of them haven't. But to see my wife and then me kind of come forward with it and see the fruition of what's going on, it's such a refreshing thing just to be a part of a ministry like this to help children that are in need. But it's so easy for people. And the number one thing is people will say, I could never give them back. I could never do this. I could never do this. And it's like, well, number one, we can't. We still don't know what we're doing. We're just willing. And number two, it's not about you. It's about them. Like, they're going into a foreign world. Like, our children, like, are 8 and 5 years old, and they're hearing these stories, these crazy stories of stuff that you would only see on the news and TV. That they're in it too. And we want to expose them. Like I said earlier, I want them to expose them to the real world, like what really goes on in a safe manner. But there's nothing like this type of feeling that you get when you do bring these children into your home and just love on them, because that's what they need. So anybody that's out there on the fence, hopefully it's God speaking through me to tell you, you need to go do it, or you need to go talk to your wife about it or whatever, because there's a lot of need. There's a lot of children out there that need foster parents. They just need people that are willing. So.
Yeah, and I think about like in the book of James, it talks about looking out for like the orphans and widows and that kind of stuff. And we are the body of Christ, so we are called to come together and to fulfill that need for fatherless children. People that don't have families. And I just think it's such a cool thing to hear your heart for that ministry. And once again, those who are interested, definitely reach out to Chris. We'll give you his contact information here at the end of the episode. But hey, Coach, I wanted to dive into the topic of identity. Okay. Yep. So strength and conditioning, so easy to get sucked into. I'm a strength coach. That's my whole identity. And it's the same thing we kind of preach towards our athletes, right? Like your identity is not in your sport, like you're a person, but like then we turn around and we get sucked into the trap of making our entire world all consuming. Just, it's all about me and my coaching, and I do all these great things. So what has been your experience with identity in strength and conditioning and some of the common traps? We talked about a few of them already, not having Sundays, common traps that our people in our profession fall into.
Yeah. I mean, I similar to what I talked about earlier, when I've talked to people actually in a ministry context, vocationally, our ministers or their pastors or whatever, is I've met so many coaches that say, this is my call. Like, God called me to raise up young men and women through this vessel of sport, and something that God's given me a gift and a passion for. Because I'm the first one to do that. Like, I left a graduate program and my PhD program to go back into coaching, because that's what I felt God was calling me to do. And God has provided every step of the way. God has taken us from Indiana to Florida to a billion different states. Yeah. We've never missed a meal. We've always had the money, and all the sacrifices, all that. But really this year, and I think I talked to you a little bit about in our previous call, was like just the awareness piece of, if you do have a wife and you have children, you have close supporters and brothers and sisters in Christ around you to actually speak into you. I think it's so easy for us in this field because of the time demand, because of that calling piece, which I think really trips some people up. And when they say that, is like the intention of, I'm doing all these great things because I'm called to do this. And you get the blinders on and it becomes an idol in your life. And I think when you talk about identity, it's such a thing of who you are. Like, if I were to ask you and you ask me, hey, Chris, tell me a little about yourself. And I'd say, hey, I'm Chris McCormick. I'm the director of strength and conditioning for Olympic sports at FAU. That probably shouldn't be the first thing I say. It should be, I'm a believer. I'm a husband. Most of the Twitter handles and people are putting that in their bio and stuff like that. It's cliche, but it's true. As men, we do that all the time. It's like sizing each other up. Like, where are you a strength coach at? Like, what's your logo? Like, job wise, all that stuff. And I think as a believer, it becomes your identity in Christ, or is it kind of as a coach? So it's like the selfless idea. This life is no longer mine. This is who I identify with. Or is it going to be this job title that I probably won't have for a very long time? Or this job is going to eventually go away. And I think when we get caught up in that, it just gets so consuming that your intentions, and I've talked to my wife about this a lot, is she will tell me stuff, or she has told me stuff in the past. And I think because I'm doing a good job everywhere else, that I'm probably doing a good job here. Yeah. And that's not always the case. Yeah. And that's a blessing straight from her, because I'm hard-headed and she's blunt. And that's, I think, why God gave her to me. And it's because I've sometimes have not seen it. And even though you have the best intent, because we're very selfless people, especially in strength and conditioning, sometimes we're never going to get the accolade, or we're going to be the reason why we're not being successful, say, within a team. So I think figuring that out, especially that intro, and really just self-reflecting and being like, hey, what am I really identifying myself as? And your time and your talents and your treasures, we talk about that. Well, it's probably going to be stuck in your job, but just because you spend a lot of time at your job, does that mean that's what you're always talking about when you're associating with people? What do other people think of you? When they think of you, what are they going to say? And I think that is a huge kind of, I guess, a reflection tool when you're talking about identity.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm super excited about to get into next is your life plan, which I'll let Justin ask you about it. But just for our listeners, like what he's talking about right now is this concept of identity. We are not just strength and conditioning coach. Like as a Christian, we are Christian first, who happens to be a strength and conditioning coach, who happens to be, you know, a personal trainer or whatever, a coach, somebody in the private industry, private sector. So I think the whole concept of identity is extremely important. And, you know, with thinking of like the situation like COVID, we had all this time to reflect, like, and we still have time. Right now is the middle of December that we're recording this, and we're kind of on that Christmas break. All the athletes are home. So we have pockets of time, even though we're so busy all the time, we have pockets of free time when we can reflect and do these things. I just want to applaud you and say, like, I am so encouraged by our conversation so far, and also from talking yesterday, from you actually doing that and challenging the status quo of our identity is not just in strength conditioning. Like it's so much more. There's other areas of our life that we need to balance.
So guys, if you're checking this out on iTunes or Spotify, I'm going to share my screen right now and pull up Coach's Performance Pathway. If you want to see that, again, just go to the YouTube channel and you can see that there. But Coach, I'm going to throw this up on the screen. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. So Coach, do you want to just take us and our listeners through how you came up with the Performance Pathway, what it is, and just give us the rundown?
Yeah, for sure. And if anybody wants a copy of this, you can have the Excel, PDF, whatever. I would love to send to you. Just reach out to me. But this is not my original idea. This is just more of my strength coach building templates and colors and alliterations and all those things combined to put something together that's practical. A lot of this I actually pulled from a book called Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and another company called Building Champions. And it's really this life plan idea. So during the COVID time for me, it was a great reflection time because I was at home, I was with my family. You're spending all this time with your family that you typically have not been able to do. And it became almost like this idea of me being a director also is building all these systems and all this stuff out within an organization. But what about your life too? And this topic of identity has come up so much to me indirectly that God's just really put on my heart because I've seen more specifically other marriages and other people social media wise. Like I'll see everything look great on social media and then I'll talk to them and it's like, my marriage is terrible. This is terrible. These things are falling apart. All these components of their life, which you'll see a little bit on the screen if you're looking at this. So for me, it was really exploring some different ways of how can I build a self-awareness of everything that's going on with my life. And strength and conditioning is not the center. And then I'm just going to piece together everything, which 9 times out of 10, a lot of us sometimes do that with our faith too. Is like, well, Jesus will be stuck on the side and hopefully we'll figure it out. And it's an addition. And it's never meant to be that way. So even with this, I think if you want to write Jesus straight down the middle, if you're a believer or he, you'll see like it says me, we, be. Like that's really what it should permeate through all of these categories. But that Living Forward book, all it does is pretty much have you write a eulogy and pretty much work backwards for the major people in your life, your wife, your children, your parents. What would they say about you at your funeral? And if you were standing there, what would you want them to say? And that's pretty, morbid, but that's also very great because it allows you to really see how am I really and where am I going and what would they really say? So I think this is where you can kind of build out almost like a business. It's like a mission, values. If you have any of those things personally, you have it for your department. That's essentially what I did with this, but I just use P's. This is like purpose, priorities, pursuits to build it from like a big 30,000 view to actionable things I can do daily and weekly to kind of build upon goals that I have set and what I want to be said and done that are going to match up to that. So just like any other program, we're trying to work forward to get some type of result. So really at the top view, I can see it's really a purpose or your mission or your why. I think is a big thing a lot of people say. And I think for most believers, that should be this. Pretty simple is go live and love like Jesus. That's what we want to do. The values or my priorities. these are really things that I want to work on and become better at. It's something as a constant reminder daily. I try to review this every day, and I have it in my Bible laminated, like a very small version of it. And it's something I can just look over and kind of look at and just gravitate towards certain things. How am I doing on certain things as we go? But just listening, offering more value, empathizing more. Sometimes I lack empathizing other people, which is one of my faults. And how can I grow in that? And certain ways I can go about doing that. And then really the pursuit and the practice side is really the practical part, is like these end game outcomes, the pursuits. What am I going after? I chose 9 different categories: body, mind, and spirit, which is really me, myself individually. The we is really my relationships, the things around me, is my marriage, my parenting, and then really my family, social, kind of other relationships out there. And then really the last one is the things I do. So I put B because it all looks nice and fancy and rhymes, is career, hobbies, and then my financial piece within our family and our life. And I really had a one kind of summary statement for it, and was like, hey, this is what I want it to be about, or this is what I would like to be defined in this area. And there's a lot of obviously Christian influence on this. And I have a Bible verse next to it that's something to refer from the Bible that I can look back on if it is parenting or marriage, or even mentally or and spiritually wise. And then under that, the practice side is those things I actually do. So I have like 3 points that I can really do and focus on. So say for my body, it's like, I want to be physically uncomfortable or have discomfort every single day. That's something I know I can manually do. It's not super detailed, but I know I can go do it. But even with my marriage, being intentional about certain things. What has my wife talked about? And going back and referencing those things and maybe changing those things. It's going to be an ever changing document. It should be, as you grow towards what God essentially wants you to become. And then the last part really comes from Donald Miller and his Story Brand podcast and his company. If you do not listen to his podcast, or you've not read any of his books, or if you have continuing ed, Business Made Simple University, if anyone's wanting to be a director or they are a director, probably one of the best resources you possibly can do for continuing ed. And it has everything to do with communication, the life plan idea. There's an example on there that you can do, and it's practical step-by-step stuff. But really, it's your story pitch. So if you were to tell somebody, most of this I use is like, it's been my first part of my cover letter, is like, I want to tell you about me, not just my resume. I want to tell you who I am and what I'm about. And you can kind of see there, it's like, I believe people are looking to be inspired. We are all wanting someone to guide us to become more than we ever could imagine. I have a passion to help people pursue and achieve their goals. Like that's something, regardless if I was a strength coach or I worked at Walmart, that's what I would pursue. So it gets you outside of strength and conditioning, but you easily can see my career is one facet, and there's 8 other facets, which there could easily be more, that I got to actually focus on. And I told Charlie, I was like, I looked at the hobbies. I was like, I don't even have any hobbies. Like I've tried to pick some up, but I don't have any. So it's just crazy. Like you think about these things of, until you have the awareness, that is a huge piece of, you can make it look like this. You don't have to, but there's plenty of opportunities out there. More than anything, it's the self-awareness piece to make sure that there's other parts of your life, because easily one of these things, when you get to your dream job in strength and conditioning, are going to be the one thing that holds you back from actually being able to do that job. And I know, and I've seen a lot of people that have actually went through that. So.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about this is, first of all, it's very easy to follow. Okay, you could take this document and literally create your own version of it, and I highly recommend too the Living Forward by Michael Hyatt. So I got the PDF from you, Chris, and that thing has been awesome. I've been working through it. Actually, today I was working through it, so it just has some powerful reflection questions that it asks you, and it really kind of narrows in, like, where are you, where have you been, and where do you want to go, those types of things. So but I really like the idea of balance, because so many strength and conditioning coaches, I mean, this is one of the reasons we did this podcast, is to create opportunities to talk more than just the career side, just X's and O's of how to get people faster, stronger, more powerful, all that kind of stuff. We want them to become better people altogether, with their marriage, family, with parenting, their mind, body, spirit, like all those areas that you have 9 different areas. What I see here is a purposeful plan to have a balanced life. And that's kind of what one of the things that this life plan, this performance pathway, that it does, that I've just by looking at and hearing you talk about it. And we got to talk about it a lot more in depth yesterday. It's just,
Yeah.
how do you create balance in your life, and how do you make it, where you can live consistently from your core values, the way that God's called you. Yeah, he has called you, but is it specifically just for strength and conditioning? It's so much more. It's so much more than just that, and that's one of the things I really like about this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, I mean, there's so many things that because of this, I've explored and been more open to, where just because you have a passion in your career and it is a time consuming career, there's just so many things, even that you get odd looks, like foster care, for example. Like we'll be at games and you'll see a different child on my wife's hip and someone's like, what? Like, and they don't look like me. So all of a sudden people are like, what is going on? Like, and that's a great opportunity to talk. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's almost like a culture shock within athletics, is like, you're actually doing something outside of this and this isn't the only thing you do. And like you just hear it, you kind of like see that look and you're like, this is kind of sad that this might be the norm for our jobs, when this job could easily be taken away. We know so many people have been fired. I mean, I could be fired tomorrow. And is there going to be other things that you're actually pursuing outside of this? So.
Yeah.
There was actually a great study done where they asked people over the age of 95 at the end of their life if they regret anything. You guys know where I'm going with this. I see a couple nods. But I think the top three were: I would take more risk, I would reflect more, and I would invest in things that would last after I'm gone.
Yeah.
And with all those things, again, Charlie, like you mentioned, the whole reason we created this podcast, I mean, as far as I know, I don't think YouTube's taken down any videos. So this can be here forever, right? And all the people who come on the show, like yourself, Coach, it's like you're investing in something that's going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And people can listen to this as much as they'd like. And I would just highly recommend, guys, if you're into goal setting and you have a goal every year for yourself on the professional side, or maybe it's on the physical side, right? Maybe you want to hit a number in your training.
Yeah.
How many times do you have goals that are well-rounded? Do you have a financial goal like Coach has on here? Do you have a family goal, a parenting goal? And so, again, if you guys do want a copy of this, we will give you guys Coach's contact information at the end of the show. Feel free to reach out to him. And it sounds like he'd love to pass it along to you.
Sure.
So I'm going to unshare my screen here, guys. And we'll keep.
And Coach, we'll keep rolling here. We're almost done, but we got some questions about just some different lessons that God maybe has taught you in the field and also in life. So my first question for you is, in regards to strength and conditioning, I mean, you have a unique experience because you've been all over the place and you were in the football world. I mean, we talked a lot about that the other day, like football, and now all of a sudden you're not in football. You're director of Olympic sports. What would be a big lesson that you have learned in the field of strength and conditioning, that got maybe a challenge or something very difficult that God's kind of brought you through? And what did he teach you through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us struggle with humility a lot within strength and conditioning, especially when we're younger. We come in as interns, and I kind of got thrown into the fire as a young strength coach. So I went from intern to being a head strength coach, and I didn't know I was going to be a head strength coach. So there's a lot of figuring out as you go and acting like you know what's going on. I think one of the biggest lessons I think I've been taught is, and I can't remember who said it, was like, essentially the best thing isn't always the right thing. We always so easily have the best training plan. We think we know what's best for an athlete, for a team. We have these discussions with sports coaches. We get separation between athletic trainers, us. And I've been to a lot of different schools, so I've seen different just cultures within the same team, and sports med versus strength and all those things. But being able and having enough humility to step into a situation, or even just daily training and things, and realize like, this might be the overall best possible thing we could do in this situation, but it's not the right thing to do right now. And that could be culturally, that could be with an athlete, that could be with a coach, that could be, not winning this battle so I can win the war. And as a director and me having assistants, I hire on specific qualities, but when you get the right coach and not having to micromanage and do these things and let people do their jobs, that's one thing I've always see and I look for in a coach, is like, okay, you can talk to me all you want about specifics in X sport or arm action or whatever you want to go down. Like, that's fine. But if you can never utilize that information because of a relationship, because someone doesn't trust you, or you're just going to be so boneheaded and kick the door in because you think it's the best thing and it's not the right thing, I've seen that defeat more coaches than I think actually help them. And I think that is something from our vantage point as being a support staff member. Yes, we have a lot of information, but you also have to learn how to play the game. And if you don't know how to play the game, you may never get to play your best card. And I think that is, as a strength coach, I hope whoever's listening to, they actually take that to heart, because it's a hard one to hear. But I wish I would have took that when I was younger.
Yeah, it reminds me of like doing the right thing at the right time in the right way. It's wisdom is not just, oh, like this is what needs to be done. It's the best thing. It's like,
Yeah.
well, is it the most wise? Is the wisest choice for them? In this context, and it depends. And so, yeah, I think that's an incredible lesson to learn. And I agree. A lot of people come in, they're very prideful and just trying to fake it till you make it. And it's like, man, we gotta humble ourselves and realize we gotta walk in wisdom. And wisdom comes through mentors, comes through counselors, comes through continuing education, comes from being hungry and growing and learning, just like we are as Christians, same thing. Well, hey, Coach, one of the last questions we have before our fast finishers is, from a spiritual standpoint, what would be a piece of spiritual advice you could give to maybe some young strength coaches or some people that are just, wanting to grow spiritually that listen to this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably cliche to say, but actually read your Bible. Like, take a Bible, open it up and read it. I'm all for devotions. I'm all for email devotions and these different things. Like, I get them and from different sources, but actually going through a reading plan and actually doing it. And I've started journaling this year, like doing what's called a HEAR journal, almost like the SOAP method. Some people do that, where you're like highlighting, explaining it, applying it, and reflecting, like actually doing that every single time you read the Bible. But actually reading the Bible instead of doing it through someone else's words that's actually wrote what they saw from the Bible and putting it in, but actually taking the Bible, that's invaluable. That is literally God telling you what to do. And you can pray and you can question and you can do all this, but there's one way God's speaking, and it's through that book. And I think doing that, Bible engagement, I think I heard a study was saying that, like, that's the number one impactful thing is Bible engagement. It's like, well, that should be it, like, obviously. Yeah. So I think actually doing that can far change your present spiritual, wherever you're at, right there moving forward, is having actual engagement within the Bible and having a plan and even writing down your thoughts.
It's a great point. You can relate that to athletics too. I mean, an athlete, if you're a soccer player, right, you're not going to be a great soccer player if you don't pick up a soccer ball. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're not going to be a great football player if you don't ever get on the field and throw a football around or do whatever you're doing. Same thing for our spiritual life. It's like we have all these, like you said, devotionals, and we maybe watch sermons on YouTube or whatever it is, worship music. It's all great, and it's supplemental and it's important. But if you're not getting in the Word, the hard copy, spending time with Jesus by yourself, reading what He says to us. Yeah, it's like, how do you expect to grow as a Christian? And
that's the crazy thing too, is like, obviously devotionals are good, but it's like, hey, I'm dealing with anger. I'm going to read this devotional series on my YouVersion app about anger. And then you miss out so much on so many things of, like, even somebody that may never read the Old Testament, you start reading through the Old Testament and going, holy cow, like I understand what this is actually pointing to. And it's crazy if you do a plan and people don't do plans, is how much when you start reading through a plan, you might be in the most random area, Leviticus, Numbers, whatever, and you're like, this applies to me right now, what I need, and I would have guessed that, and I never would have opened my Bible and chose this. So I think that's where just understanding the Word and understanding the story more than anything of why and what and how all these things occurred is obviously going to lead to spiritual growth.
That's phenomenal, Coach. And you mentioning Bible stories and things like that. So that's one of our questions to finish up the episode with. So every episode we finish it off with what we call the fast finishers. And it's 3 questions. What's your favorite book? What's your favorite Bible verse or story from the Bible? And how do you define success? We'll take them one at a time. And the first one is, what is your favorite book?
Other than the Bible, I think my favorite book I've read probably in a while is called Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards. She's a former FBI profiler, and it's about body language. It's about reading people. It's very practical. I've seen some different books on body language, but this book is literally like, if I'm at a party or I'm at a place where I'm trying to meet a bunch of people, I need to position myself this far away from the food, because this is where you're going to get the most eye contact and talking to people. Like, it's like crazy stuff.
That's awesome. That's
and
really
you think
cool,
about it and you're like, Like you
Okay.
start going through it and you start like seeing faces, and it like it quiz you on different people's emotions and what certain faces really look like and what they mean.
Oh,
And it's like, yeah, you read it and then you start thinking about strength and conditioning of how much you do that every day, probably naturally, but it's almost like a way of teaching. If you're not very charismatic, like you have a charisma, which most coaches do, you start seeing and picking up things of like that one coach or that one person, that like everyone gravitates towards. You're like, they do all of these things, like they naturally do it and they don't even know they're doing it. So if you're looking for a read, especially over Christmas, I would recommend that book. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read.
Very cool. Appreciate you sharing that, Coach. That sounds
Yeah.
awesome. I haven't heard of that one, but I definitely want to look into
Yeah.
it now. That's great. Next question: favorite Bible verse or story from the Bible?
Yeah, I think this actually came up from my reading. My favorite story always used to be Abraham and Isaac, but I think my favorite book of the Bible now is Job, because I think it's something so reflecting in that you can do all the right things, and God can, or allow, or however you want to view it, put your future in a different direction. And I think there was a verse that stood out to me. It was a couple months ago, and I wrote it down just because I know I'd probably be asked this question. Is Job 38 verse 3 and 4. It says, "Get ready to answer me like a man. Where were you when I established the earth?" And you want to talk about humility, like we've been talking about. It's like, all right, like I'm good. Like I have nothing else to say. And dropping down to your knees and just being like, that's it. I think if we have that type of humility, the Christian life's a little bit easier to understand and pursue things, because the glory of God just outweighs everything else. And we talk about identity, we talk all those things. Like if you can't go back to that and that type of idea, a lot of the other things are very hard to live out, because then you start putting yourself in front of everything else. You start making idols of other things. So Job 38. If you're not read it, go check it out. So.
Couldn't agree more, Coach. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Last question. So how do you define success?
Yeah, I mean, I think success to me is achieving the purpose that you have in your life, and that's, for believers, is defined by what God has for you. And I think a lot of that is tied into identity. I think these questions, I think they all run together. But I think truly when people ask these questions, if it's a job, if it's someone that you're dating, if it's moving, whatever it is figuring out and tying into that purpose. And not to show the life plan idea, but the more you can crack down on that stuff and figure those things out, I think happiness will come a lot easier when you actually know what you're shooting for. It's easy for us to see that in strength and conditioning, because we make plans to get an end result and we're very structured, but we don't do that outside. So when we talk about success, it's like, what do you really want and how are you going to get there? But ultimately it's going to tie into, why am I here? Like, why am I here on this earth and what am I supposed to do? When you figure that out, I think you'll be successful, and that will be the fulfilling success that you're looking for.
yeah, that's phenomenal. I mean, consistency, identity. I mean, these are some major themes that I think we don't talk about enough, outside of just the profession of strength and conditioning, like getting outside of just the X's and O's and focusing on things that truly matter in life, your core values. So, Coach, thank you so much for being on this podcast. And if our listeners, if they wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, you guys can message me on any of the social medias. My Twitter name or my Instagram name, CMMCCORMICK7. So CM McCormick 7. Or you guys can email me at cmccormick@fau.edu, and I would love to help any way I possibly can.
Awesome. And then, we usually finish the episode with doing a prayer request. And I believe you actually said you wanted to pray for us as well. So
Yeah.
is there anything besides possibly, adopting your foster child, you and your wife? Is there anything else that we can pray for you in regards to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the main one on our agenda. And
What's the timeline like on that?
Well, I mean, it could be tomorrow. It could be, my wife's due in February, so we think we'll be signing adoption papers if it does happen in the hospital, because that's the way 2020 at least has been. So, I mean, it could be any time. We're just waiting on the state, and we're willing, and ultimately, it's not cliche to say, but we want what's best for him. I mean, if it's not with us, then we're comfortable with that, and it's not to say it's not going to be hard, but we also would love to have him. If that's what God has. So ultimately, that's really what our main focus is right now.
Nice. And then your wife's about to give birth as well, you said?
Yep. So we're going from 2 to 4, possibly very, very quick. So,
All right. I'll
yeah.
be praying for some patience and
Yeah.
lots of gentleness and grace and
Yeah.
just strength and endurance.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool. For us, really just our mission statement is encourage, equip, and empower. So, I mean, if you could just be praying for us in those regards and just trying to figure out, how to continue to keep growing this thing and have impact for God's kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, hey, let me open us up and then you can close us off.
Awesome.
Dear Lord, thank you for this time with Chris. I pray that you would just bless him and his relationships, God, especially as a father and a husband. I pray that you continue to give him opportunities to share Christ at FAU in his director position, Lord, with his staff, with his athletes, and with his fellow coworkers, God. I pray that he would lead well with the authority and responsibility that you've given him, God, with wisdom, God. Thank you so much for his willingness and humility just to share on today's episode. I pray specifically, Lord, for this situation with adopting their foster child, Lord. I pray that if it is your will, God, that you would allow that to happen, and that most of all, that they would trust you with the next step. They would hold this with their open hands and surrender. And I pray also for Coach Chris's wife, that you would allow her to have a very healthy and just pain-free, Lord, birth, and that the pregnancy and the whole birthing process, Lord, would be something that is joyful, and that they can give glory to you, God, for adding life into bringing life into this world, God. And so please just give Coach patience, give him endurance and wisdom. I pray that he would continue to strive after you with his life plan, and with continuing to put you first every day, God. I pray that you would grow his affections and his knowledge for you, Lord. And so again, thank you for this time that we had. May you continue to bring blessing and joy in Coach Chris's life.
Amen. Awesome. I'll pray for you guys really quick. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this time of just fellowship and just talking to fellow believers and those that just identify with you and your son, Lord, and all that he's done. And we just pray for this podcast, and we just pray for the mission that they have, just to reach coaches that are believers and hopefully that are not believers, Lord, that you draw them just to you through this medium, and that they hear more about you and are interested more of what's going on, and maybe what's the differences that lie just with some of these coaches that are talking about life and other things outside of just strength and conditioning. And I just pray for those that even are thinking about reaching out to these guys or just myself, Lord, and just prompt them to continue these conversations. And even something like this life plan, Lord, is I can come up with all these fancy titles and words and directions and all of this, but ultimately our purpose is in you, and the path that you have and the will that you have for each and one of our lives. Lord, help us search that and help us see how much you can permeate through all the things in our lives, not just one side thing or just the idols that we so easily put in our lives. And I pray for all the men and women, Lord, that are listening, that are in strength and conditioning, Lord, and just to have the acknowledgement of either people around them or you speaking through your word or through the Holy Spirit, Lord, to them, that this is not the center point of their life and meeting their job, Lord. It's time demanding. There's all these things going on. And I just pray that these idols can be exposed, because ultimately you want us to focus on you, and ultimately you be number one, Lord. And I just thank you for just these opportunities, Lord, just to share the gospel and share your words and share just the vision that they have, Lord, on this podcast. And you continue just to build your church through something like this. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for listening to the Built to Last podcast, where we encourage, equip, and empower coaches to live out their core values where they live, work, and wherever they build relationships. Have a blessed day, striving to build lasting impact.